She looked me in the eyes and said 4 words I never expected. "I need your help." And at first I thought she meant emotionally. Maybe something had happened. Maybe she was struggling. But then she handed me a piece of paper. It was a loan statement, her student loan balance. And the number on that page was bigger than anything I had ever seen attached to one person's name. She said, "I've been carrying this for years. I can't do it alone anymore. I need you to help me pay this off." I loved her. We had been together for almost 3 years. And in that moment, I genuinely wanted to help her. But something told me to pause. Something told me to look at this more carefully before I agreed to anything. And that small hesitation, that one moment of deciding to check the records first, ended up revealing something I was completely unprepared for. To understand why this mattered so much, you need a little background. Her name was Vanessa. We met at a work conference about 3 years before any of this happened. She was confident, sharp, and she had a way of making you feel like the most important person in the room. We got serious quickly. Within a year, she had moved in. We shared expenses, talked about the future, talked about marriage. She worked in marketing, good job, decent salary, but she had always been a little private about her finances. Whenever the topic came up, she'd change the subject or say she had it handled. I didn't push it. We weren't married yet. I figured everyone had their own money stuff to work through. But looking back now, there were a few signs I chose to ignore. She would occasionally mention the loans in passing, never the full amount, just little comments like, "I'm still paying off school," or "I'll be dealing with that debt forever." I never asked for details. I trusted her. That turned out to be a mistake. The night she handed me that statement, I told her I needed a few days to think about it. She seemed frustrated by that. I expected understanding. Instead, I got silence and a kind of cold distance that felt like pressure. That bothered me, but the real moment, the one that made everything shift, came 2 days later. I was helping her organise some documents for an unrelated insurance claim when I came across an old email she had accidentally left open on our shared laptop. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't looking for anything. But the subject line caught my eye before I could look away. It said, "Loan payoff confirmation account ending 4,471. I stopped. Loan payoff confirmation. I didn't know what that meant yet, but I knew she had just asked me to pay off her student loans. And here was an email about a loan already being paid off. I told myself there was probably a simple explanation, but that's when I started to feel like something wasn't right. And that's when I decided to look. I didn't open the email. I didn't want to cross that line without knowing more. Instead, I started with what she had actually given me, the loan statement. I looked at it more carefully this time, really looked at it. The statement showed a balance of just over $42,000. It listed the original loan amounts, the interest accumulated, and the servicer's name. But something seemed off about the dates. The loan origination dates on the statement were from almost 15 years ago. Vanessa was 31. She had told me she graduated at 22, which would have made sense for a 9-year-old loan. But the loan amounts themselves didn't match what she had described. She had told me she studied communications at a state university, a 4-year degree, but the original loan totals on this statement were closer to what you'd see from a private school or a graduate program. I started doing the math, and the math didn't work. One detail led to another. I searched the service's name on the statement. It was a real company. But when I cross-referenced some of the account details she had written on a sticky note attached to the statement, the information didn't line up with what the service's public records showed. And that's when things got weird. I pulled up her university's public alumni directory. Her name was there. She had graduated. That part was true. But her degree was listed as a 2-year associate's program, not a 4-year degree like she had told me for 3 years. I sat with that for a moment. She had lied about her education. That was already a lot, but that still didn't fully explain the loan statement. A 2-year associate's degree wouldn't generate $42,000 in student debt at a state school in the early 2000s. The numbers just didn't add up, not even close. So I kept going. I finally did something I probably should have done earlier. I asked a friend of mine who works in financial advisory to look at the statement with me. I didn't tell him the full story. I just asked him to look at the numbers and tell me what he thought. He looked at it for about 90 seconds. Then he looked at me. He said, "This isn't a student loan statement." I asked him what he meant. He pointed to a series of small details, formatting inconsistencies, account number structures that didn't match federal student loan services, and an interest rate that was significantly higher than any government loan would carry. He said it looked like a personal loan, possibly a private credit line, and the moment he said that, everything changed. Because the truth wasn't what I expected at all. Vanessa didn't have $42,000 in student loan debt. She had $42,000 in personal debt, likely credit cards or a private lender, and she had presented it to me as a student loan, knowing that student loans carry a kind of sympathetic weight that personal debt simply doesn't. She hadn't just asked me to bail her out. She had constructed a story to make it easier for me to say yes. I told myself maybe I was wrong. Maybe my friend had missed something. Maybe there was an explanation. So I looked deeper. I went back through 3 years of small moments that I had brushed off. The vacation she insisted on taking that we put on her card. The designer bag she said was a gift from her sister. The car she traded in suddenly last year for something cheaper, telling me she just wanted something more practical. I started adding things up. The spending patterns told a story on their own, and then I found something else. While pulling up some shared financial documents we had saved together for a joint account we were planning to open, I found a folder I had never noticed before. Inside that folder were statements, real statements, not the ones she had handed me going back almost 2 years. The balances across multiple accounts were staggering. Credit cards, a personal loan, a second personal loan, medical debt she had never mentioned. The total across everything was closer to $90,000, not $42,000, nearly double what she had shown me. And the statement she handed me, the one she presented as her student loans, it was only one piece of a much larger picture she had deliberately kept hidden. And that's when I realised this situation was much bigger than I thought. I didn't explode. I didn't confront her the moment I found out. I sat with it for 2 days because I wanted to be calm. I wanted to be fair. I wanted to give her the chance to explain everything in her own words without me coming at her with accusations. So I asked her to sit down with me one evening after dinner. I kept my voice steady. I told her I had looked more carefully at the statement she gave me. At first she smiled and said she was glad I was taking it seriously. Then I told her what my friend had said. The smile faded. She said he was wrong, that it was definitely a student loan, that I was making things complicated. So I put the folder of real statements on the table. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard in my life. Then the story started to change. First she said the other accounts were old and mostly paid off. They weren't. Then she said she had been planning to tell me everything once we were engaged. I pointed out we had been together 3 years and she had never once come close to that conversation. Then she said she had been ashamed. And I believe that part, I genuinely did. But shame doesn't explain fabricating a document. Shame doesn't explain the deliberate choice to show me only one piece of a $90,000 whole and frame it as something more sympathetic. Eventually, she admitted what she had done. She said she knew I would never agree to help her if I knew the full amount. So she decided to start with what she thought I could handle, hoping that once I was in, I would feel too invested to walk away. She called it a strategy. I called it something else. We didn't end that night. We tried for another few weeks, to be honest, but something had broken. And both of us knew it. Not because of the debt. Debt is real. Debt is hard. And I genuinely believe she was drowning and didn't know how to ask for help in a way that felt safe. I could have worked with the truth. What I couldn't work with was the realization that when she felt cornered, her instinct wasn't to trust me. Her instinct was to manage me. And the scariest part of that isn't that it happened once. The scariest part is wondering how many other times it had happened without me ever catching it. That moment completely changed the way I saw everything we had built together. Not because of the money, not because of the debt, but because of what it revealed about how she saw me not as a partner, but as a problem to be solved. Sometimes the most painful thing isn't the lie itself. It's discovering that someone you loved looked at your trust and saw an opportunity. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. I hope she got the help she needed. I genuinely do. But I also learned something I won't forget. Love is not a reason to skip due diligence. And checking the records, no matter how uncomfortable it feels, is sometimes the most important thing you can do.